This story begins with a man named Andy Dufresne, who works as a banker. He is currently standing trial in court, accused of murdering his own wife. During the trial, Andy tries everything he can to prove that he is innocent. But the court rejects every single argument he makes in his defense. He is given 2 life sentences, one after the other. That means Andy will now spend the rest of his life behind bars. He is sent to Shawshank, one of the most dangerous prisons in the country. Inside, we meet a man named Red, who is being interviewed by the parole board. This board will decide whether Red deserves to be granted parole or not. Red has already spent 20 years here and has never once passed this interview. This time is no different, and despite his efforts, his parole request is denied yet again. Meanwhile, a truck arrives carrying new prisoners for Shawshank, including Andy. Watching the new arrivals, the older inmates start betting among themselves. Red bets that Andy will be the first to break since he looks so quiet, but Red loses that bet because another inmate breaks down that very night. Hearing him sobbing loudly, Captain Hadley storms into his cell. Hadley drags the man violently out of his cell without any warning. Hadley is the chief guard of this prison, and he loves torturing the inmates. He unleashes all his anger on the man, beating him for hours like an animal. By the next morning, word spreads that the man died from Hadley's brutal beating. Andy is deeply saddened by this and tries to find out the man's name, but none of the other inmates tell him, warning him to mind his own business. Days keep passing by, and slowly Andy starts to get used to prison life. He learns that Red smuggles all kinds of things inside the prison walls. So Andy approaches him and asks for a small hammer of all things. Red suspects Andy might use it to dig his way out and escape. Andy flatly denies it, but Red agrees to the request anyway. Red also warns Andy to stay far away from a gang called the Sisters. This gang's leader, Boggs, loves tormenting every new inmate who arrives. For the first few months, Andy spends most of his time in the laundry room, or else fighting off Boggs and his men who keep targeting him relentlessly. Even so, Andy stays happy, because he and Red have grown quite close. The two of them spend most of their time together, simply talking and bonding. One day, a job opening comes up to repair the prison's rooftop. Red pulls some strings and gets Andy and his friends hired for this job. While working up on the roof one day, Andy notices Captain Hadley looking quite troubled. Overhearing him, Andy realizes that Hadley is worried about a large tax payment he owes. Since Andy used to work as a banker, he walks over and offers Hadley some financial advice. Hadley is furious at first, but he's soon amazed by Andy's sharp financial knowledge. Andy tells him that if he's allowed to do this work, he can cut Hadley's tax bill in half. In return, he asks only for some ice-cold beer for himself and his friends. Hadley agrees to the deal, and once the job is done, he treats them all to cold beer. Time passes, and Andy fully adjusts to the rhythm and routine of prison life. He becomes friendly with the other inmates too, and life starts feeling easier for him. A few days later, Andy goes back to Red with a strange new request. Since he adores the actress Rita Hayworth, he asks Red for her poster. Red finds the request a little odd, but agrees to get it for him anyway. The very next day, members of the Sisters gang suddenly attack Andy while he's working. This time, however, Andy doesn't flinch and boldly threatens Boggs and his men. Boggs gets a little rattled by this, but still beats Andy severely for standing up to him. Andy ends up spending several days recovering in the prison hospital afterward. Because of this fight, Boggs is thrown into solitary confinement for an entire month. When he finally comes out, Hadley beats him so brutally that he's paralyzed for life. Meanwhile, once Andy is discharged from the hospital, Red gives him that Rita Hayworth poster as a gift. Word of Andy's talents reaches the warden, who visits his cell under the pretext of a search. He finds Andy quietly reading the Bible with nothing illegal anywhere in his cell. Pleased by this, the warden tells Andy to keep on reading his Bible regularly. Soon after, Andy is put in charge of the prison library, alongside an inmate named Brooks. In exchange, he must give financial advice to every officer working in the prison. Later on, Andy gets the idea that the library really needs to be expanded. He discusses this with the warden, who tells him to write directly to the government for funds. So that's exactly what Andy does, writing letters week after week without giving up. As time goes on, Andy becomes quite well known even in the prisons nearby. Officers from other prisons even start coming to Andy for financial guidance and advice. He eventually becomes the warden's personal financial advisor, helping him plan for retirement. One day, Brooks suddenly takes a fellow inmate hostage, shocking the entire prison. This is surprising because Brooks was always calm and had never once broken a rule. The truth is, Brooks' sentence is finally ending after 50 long years behind bars. But instead of feeling joy, he's terrified since the outside world has changed so much. So he tries to kill his friend, hoping he'll be forced to stay in prison forever. Luckily, Andy arrives just in time and convinces him that a whole world is waiting outside. Red tells Andy that these prison walls are strange and unforgiving creatures indeed. At first they trouble you deeply, but with time you slowly grow used to them. A short while later, Brooks is finally released and steps into the modern world outside. He's completely stunned by how much everything has changed since he went in. Though he's free now, he simply cannot forget those 50 years spent inside Shawshank. Outside, he has no home, no friends, and no family left waiting for him. To adjust, he takes a job at a local supermarket just to fill his days. But even with the job, his crushing loneliness never seems to fade away at all. In the end, he does something nobody ever expected him to do. Brooks takes his own life in his small hotel room, leaving everyone heartbroken. Before he goes, he carves a simple message onto the wall: Brooks was here. Meanwhile, Andy has now completed 6 full years inside Shawshank Prison. After years of writing letters, the government finally sends money for the library. They also send along a stack of old books and several music CDs. Among these, Andy discovers the CD of a very beautiful, famous song. He wants all his fellow inmates to hear this song too, no matter the risk. So he sneaks into the warden's office and locks himself inside completely. Then he plays the song over the prison's loudspeakers for everyone to hear. The sound gives goosebumps to every single prisoner listening in that moment. Even the most dangerous inmates in Shawshank get lost in the song's sheer beauty. The warden, however, is furious about this stunt and does not appreciate it one bit. As punishment, he locks Andy away in solitary confinement for 2 full weeks. Meanwhile, Red has now spent a full 30 years inside this very prison. Once again, he goes before the board, hoping this time he'll finally get parole. But just like every time before, his parole request is denied once more. Impressed by Andy's continued good behavior, the government increases the library's yearly budget. Andy uses this money wisely, putting it toward the inmates' education. He teaches many inmates to read and write, preparing them for life after release. He hopes that this way they won't end up meeting the same tragic fate as Brooks. Meanwhile, the warden secretly uses Andy's financial knowledge to earn a huge amount of money. He also forces the other inmates to work as unpaid labor, doubling his own profits. To hide all this illegal money, Andy opens several bank accounts under a fake identity. All these accounts belong to a man named Randall, who doesn't actually exist at all. Randall is nothing more than a name written down on official paperwork. Andy planned it this way, so that if police ever discovered the scandal one day, they would go chasing after Randall instead of suspecting the actual warden himself. As the years pass, in 1965, a new inmate named Tommy arrives at Shawshank. He's been sentenced to just 2 years and needs to serve his time here. Tommy is a tall, cheerful man who easily makes friends with everyone around him. As soon as he arrives, he becomes close friends with both Andy and Red. One day, Tommy approaches Andy and asks for help completing his high school education. Andy happily agrees and spends the next several months personally tutoring him. After all this hard work, Tommy is finally ready to sit for his final exam. But during the exam, he gets so frustrated that he throws away his answer sheet. Despite this, Andy secretly pulls the sheet out of the trash and submits it himself. The very next day, while chatting casually, Tommy makes a shocking revelation to Andy. Tommy explains that at his old prison, he once met a certain dangerous man. This man had confessed to murdering a golfer and his girlfriend years earlier. He also admitted to framing an innocent banker for the murder he actually committed. Hearing this, Andy is completely stunned, because that innocent banker was none other than himself. The moment he realizes this, Andy rushes straight to the warden's office for help. He begs the warden to reopen his case, with Tommy testifying as his key witness. But the warden flatly refuses and locks Andy away in solitary for a full month. The warden fears that if Andy is freed, no one will manage his illegal money anymore. While Andy is locked away in that dark cell, Tommy officially receives his diploma. He had passed his final exam with surprisingly excellent marks thanks to Andy's help. A short while later, the warden calls Tommy outside the prison walls alone. There, Captain Hadley shoots Tommy dead in cold blood without any hesitation. And with that single act, Andy's last hope of proving his innocence disappears forever. The next morning, the warden calmly tells Andy the news about Tommy's death. He claims Tommy was trying to escape, and that's exactly why Hadley shot him. Andy doesn't believe a single word of the warden's fabricated story at all. Furious, he refuses to help manage the warden's dirty money ever again. The warden threatens him, warning that he'll shut down the library forever if Andy refuses. After coming out of that dark room, Andy grows deeply quiet and sad. Noticing this change, Red starts to genuinely worry about his close friend. Andy eventually opens up, admitting he was always too busy with work after his marriage. He believes this distance is what slowly ruined his relationship with his wife. Deep down, Andy still blames himself completely for his wife's tragic death. He tells Red that his only goal left in life is to escape this prison. He wants to reach a small town in Mexico and live out his days peacefully there. He describes a special hidden location to Red where he's buried something valuable. He asks Red to go there someday once he's finally released and free. Time continues to pass, and Andy quietly resumes managing the warden's illegal funds. Red, however, isn't happy watching this at all, and worries constantly for his friend. His worry only deepens when Andy asks other inmates for a 6-foot-long rope. The very next morning during roll call, the guards notice Andy is nowhere to be found. After a brief search, they discover that Andy Dufresne has escaped from the prison entirely. Using that very hammer Red once gave him, Andy had carved a secret tunnel. He dug it patiently through the thick wall of his own prison cell. Every time he dug, he would carry the loose dirt out in his pockets. He'd scatter this dirt across the prison yard so no one would ever notice. The Rita Hayworth poster he'd asked for was only ever meant to hide this tunnel. This reveals that Andy had been planning his escape since his very first day inside. Before escaping, Andy carefully packs the warden's documents and some of his clothes. He stuffs everything into a plastic bag and flees the prison under cover of night. While the warden desperately searches for Andy's body, Andy visits several different banks. These are the very banks where the warden's fake accounts had all been opened. Posing convincingly as Randall, Andy withdraws every single penny of the warden's money. He also mails all the evidence against the warden to the country's biggest newspaper. As soon as the story breaks, chaos erupts across the entire country instantly. In no time, the prison is completely swarmed with police officers everywhere. The police arrest Hadley for Tommy's murder, along with several other corrupt officers. But when the police finally reach the warden's office, they find him lying dead. The warden had shot himself with his own gun, unable to face what he'd done. He couldn't bear the shame or the thought of spending his remaining life in prison. A few months after this incident, Red receives a postcard in the mail. It had been sent by none other than Andy himself from somewhere far away. Seeing the postcard, Red understands that Andy has safely reached Mexico at last. When Red finally completes 50 full years in prison, the board calls him in again. This time, he makes no effort at all to impress the board members. Instead, he speaks with complete honesty, openly expressing regret for his past crimes. Moved deeply by his sincerity, the board members finally approve his long-awaited parole. Once released, Red goes straight to the same hotel where Brooks once stayed. He even takes on the exact same job that Brooks used to work. Next, he travels to the address Andy had once described to him long ago. There, he finds a hidden box filled with a large sum of money and a letter. In this letter, Andy reveals the exact place in Mexico where he's currently living. Before setting off from Mexico, Red visits that same hotel one final time. He writes his own name on the wall, right beside Brooks's carved message. In the final scene, we see Red arriving on a beautiful, sunny beach at last. There, he finally reunites with Andy, his oldest and most loyal friend. Seeing Red again after all these years fills Andy with pure joy and relief. I really hope you enjoyed today's story as much as I enjoyed telling it.